Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be recorded later on for YouTube and hopefully for the benefit of anybody in the future that wants to try to figure out funding methods for your Guatemala program. My name is Steve Foster, and I've got a few esteemed guests here this evening. One of which is here with us right now, Justin Phillips.
Hey guys, how you doing?
And then we're going to be joined here in a little bit by Nate Donovan as well. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to sharing the screen. And I think you still should be able to see us. So why don't we just go ahead, let me just here we go. Perfect. Okay. So the point of this session is to be able to talk about funding for your Guatemala trip. I know a lot of people out there really like the idea of immersing yourself in Guatemala, specifically with a cohort of like-minded educators. However, as we all know, education in the United States isn't the highest paying profession. We all do it for other reasons, obviously. And so this session is meant to be able to hopefully lead you on the right path to be able to get that funding that you may need so that it is able to be a reality despite the restraints that we may have in our careers. So why don't we go into quick introductions. My name is Steve Foster, and I'm the program coordinator for Spanish4Educators. We've been leading Guatemala Immersion Programs for educators for the past 7 years. And then Justin.
Yeah, my name is Justin Phillips. I'm a principal of an elementary school in San Diego, and I'm about, 5 months or so off my first trip with Spanish4Educators. And I just can't say enough about the value of the professional development experience that is available if you can figure out this funding piece and how to get people, just how to get yourself there.
Thanks, Justin. And then we're also going to be joined here in a little bit by Nate Donovan. Just to give you a little bit of an intro about Nate, he is a man of many hats. He started out as a lawyer, and he decided he wanted to do something different. And so he became a bus driver, a school bus driver. And that's where his journey in Guatemala started. He was able to travel to Guatemala through the support of the Equity and Diversity Coordinator in his district. And since then, there's been another district that he's also associated with that has also done a similar program that's been funded at the district level. So the expertise as far as our panelists for today are really to be able to secure funding at the district level, but from a couple of different lenses. So quick introduction as far as the agenda. The three main areas that we're going to be talking about today are specifically funding from your school, if that's a possibility. We're going to kind of brainstorm a few different ways as far as that goes. Funding from your school district, and that's where Justin and Nate are mainly going to be chiming in, although they're welcome to chime in at any time. And then also funding from nonprofits and community organizations. So hopefully, we'll be here for about maybe 30, 45 minutes and get some good ideas to be able to launch you on your way to hopefully meeting me down in Guatemala. First of all, as far as funding from your school, a lot of this depends on the demographics, obviously, of your school. Sometimes schools, as many people know out there, have very involved parent organizations, and that could be an avenue where parents do want, obviously, teachers that are well-rounded, that are competent, culturally competent, and have these types of experiences. So it's worth a shot as far as reaching out to your parent organization. If that's, I know I was involved in a school. I've been teaching for the last 12 years. Currently, I'm at the district level doing some curriculum and assessment work in Durango, Colorado. But I was previously, at one point in my career, I was in Denver at a large middle school in Denver Public Schools. And it was a public, it was called an innovation school. And they did have a parent-based kind of foundation that they did take grants from teachers to be able to fund this sort of thing. And we kind of had an auction every year, and was able to raise some money through different things like auctions and other fundraisers. So that's always a possibility. If you're not able to be able to depend on something like that, you can always try GoFundMe. And what I have found with GoFundMe is if it's somebody else besides the person that's trying to get the funding, it sometimes can speak volumes as far as like, hey, my kid's teacher is trying to get to Guatemala, and this is why I really love that teacher. This is why they've been great for my child. And to be able to kind of show that it's not just the person that's doing the GoFundMe, but it's actually a kind of a third entity that is that's taken that on, and it really shows the value of you as a person, and to be able to let people know about a little bit about your background, but maybe from a different perspective. So that's my advice as far as that goes. And then we have had a few times where through whatever method, teachers will reach out to their principals, and whether they are English language development teachers or Spanish teachers, or maybe teachers at a dual immersion programs types model of school, that the building administrator will recognize the value of a program like this, and they'll be able to find some funds through the school budget to be able to at least partially compensate for something like this. And I think that Justin's probably going to get into it a little bit here in the district section, but typically it is a little bit easier to be able to fund the actual program itself as opposed to like the travel, like the airfare, for a wide variety of reasons. But that's always something that is, you know, you can kind of do a compromise where it's like, as long as you can help me out with the program, then I can try to get my own airfare, and that makes it a lot more reasonable to have to take $600 out of your own pocket instead of $2,600. So that's something that I'm, you know, again, I'm pretty sure that Justin's gonna.
Can I add something here, Steve? So a lot of schools this time of year are in, like ours, are in budget time, thinking about the coming year. And I wouldn't underestimate kind of being an ambassador for your school for an experience like this. Like Steve said, to get some energy around sending a group of parents. And so and just remember that, especially when it comes to things like Title I funds, that groups of parents and other stakeholders do have some voice in terms of how those dollars are spent. And so just as an example, I pitched participation in this program in some of the out years, so like the 2021, and just priced out what it would cost to send, say, 3 of our teachers out there. And my voice lent credibility to the just to the expertise and the experience of the program, all in the name of creating a group of educators on campus that are culturally competent and that can connect to families in a much deeper way. So even if it's just getting it in the mix of the conversation this year for next, that might be a way to just start thinking about professional development dollars in out years.
Yeah, it's a great point, Justin. And to kind of go along with that note, I know you kind of touched on the value of a culturally competent educator. And just to remind people that may not be super familiar with Spanish4Educators, our 2 main objectives are, yes, cultural competence, and then also language development. So in a 2-week program, the language development is huge. You're going to definitely make a lot of strides. I know Justin can probably talk to this, but more than anything, the value that kind of goes forth is going to be your cultural competence, because, you know, learning another language, even though Spanish is not as difficult comparatively to a lot of other languages, it still typically takes longer than 2 weeks. So while you are going to make a lot of huge strides on Spanish, it's really the cultural competence that you're going to really come back and be kind of a changed educator for. you have anything to add for that, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But even having some small conversational skills when you're realistic that you're not going to take on a whole language in a few weeks, I think you can't underestimate how many open doors that creates with just connecting to students, which has to be important to all our schools at this point.
And I can't help but just share a little bit about Justin, about kind of your story with your student population and like you're going to Huawei and everything. Can you just do like a little 2-minuter as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about how I positioned myself and pitched this opportunity as the school leader. But I think what he's referencing is it coming back, having experiences, having photos, having volcanic rock from a volcano to just, it's opened doors in terms of me having the ability to have conversations with different families. And they aren't like planned situations, although we're working towards getting families together. But to be able to say, hey, I was in your town, you know, to connect with them about the sites, about food, about those types of things. Those were bridges and points of common that were in common that I didn't have before I went to the trip. So when we talk about connecting with children and families that are entering a context that is so foreign a lot of times to themselves and an educational system which does have different expectations than what they were used to, having been in the schools, right, through this program and having taught in the schools and worked alongside teachers and then having to just gone to some beautiful places allowed me to have some conversations with people just in these first few months of school that, you know, that couldn't be captured in a PD room down at the district office.
Totally, and I don't even think that it really matters. I mean, it's great if you do have a certain amount of your population that does come from, for example, Guatemala, but I think with the cultural competence, that's transferable. So it's not necessarily like you have to have Guatemalan kids in your class just to be able to be immersed in a different culture. I think that's something that you will be able to transfer to any number of international-based students in your school. So. Yeah. Cool, thank you. So we're moving on to funding from your school district. So let me see if I can move this window up a little bit here. There we go. Okay. So first off, Justin's going to talk a little bit about kind of the way that he secured funding, and I've got a document that I'm going to kind of screencast as he's going through that. So I'll try to be like the Vanna White of this whole thing. And then we're going to get into a few other avenues. Hopefully by then, Nate will also be able to join us. I know that he's traveling for his job, and so he's kind of trying to figure out how to get hooked up to the connection. So yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Okay. So I just want to give you some practical advice as you think about putting together a proposal, because that's the first thing I think I would advise if you were trying to secure funding from a department, from a district, or from a school. Even having access to some of those funds at my site, I had to go to my area superintendent and really connect it to the need. So I would advise doing some analysis of your site and your district, and really being able to, in some brief language, be able to define the need and the value. So for me, we were experiencing an influx of students from Guatemala specifically, but like Steve said, many of your schools may not have students specifically from Guatemala, but have students that are coming from different cultural contexts or different countries, or there's a language barrier. So one of the things I did in terms of positioning the need was just share some of the numbers. So at our school, we had 40 students in 6 months show up, and we were really struggling to meet some of their needs. And so I just voiced that. I use data, which is powerful in our context. You know, folks don't want to hear that, hey, there's one student from a European country and therefore you want to go on a vacation. That's not the tone you want to take. It's really about how you as a professional can meet a need that's presenting itself at your site. So the next thing I did was just kind of price out some of the or articulate some of the benefits that were going to come along with the program. Steve and Spanish4Educators have done a great job in terms of listing the component parts. So some things that you're going to want to mention are connection to some other educators who are also pursuing this learning. We know that professionals, educators like ourselves, learn with other people, right? So it's not a solo mission that you're going out there. Another thing you're going to do is some high-level readings in advance of the trip and while you're there. You're going to do some deep reflections, both in a group and on your own. You're going to be getting one-to-one Spanish lessons that are tailored to where you're at and your level, which is just good learning. And then you're going to have some cultural experiences that are going to deepen themselves. It helps that the program and the language component is connected to a university in terms of having being substantial and professional that way. So helping them know what you're going to do there was helpful. The next thing I did was I articulated how I wanted to put skin in the game. And so I just decided that, hey, I'll foot for the airfare, which ended up being a little bit more expensive when I missed a flight in Mexico City, but that's a whole nother screencast story. But I think that helped ease some of the questions as well, for them to say, okay, this is much like a conference, so to speak, that you're going to, even though it's international. I also didn't want to navigate all the travel budget expense procedures that were at the district level, although I think maybe I would the second time around. For me, it was cleaner to say, hey, pay for this tuition for a class, for this immersion experience that's connected to Western Colorado University. Here's where it falls on the calendar. Here's what the price tag is for it. And then finally, I wanted to talk about what a value it was going to be for the district. So the one piece from the district that was a little bit of pushback was, hey, we're not really into, so to speak, funding your higher education or for you to get some advanced degree. And it's really about getting some skills that are actually going to flow back to the benefit of the district. So with the skills, with some of the things that you'll be able to lead when you come back, you want to say that it's going to be able to have an impact on student achievement. It's going to have an impact on your ability to engage parents in learning and getting them into the site. And so those were a few things that I did. Kind of explain a purpose, use some data while I was doing it, articulate the benefits that I was going to experience as an educator. And then finally, how is this going to be a value to the district? And so, again, having that written down and having it be succinct, you can see some of the sections there: value to the district, deliverables. Yeah, like I said, I just kind of put this together knowing how district leaders think, but I think it's an example that you could kind of mimic depending on who you were going to pitch the idea to or try to secure funding with.
So real quick, Justin, you had mentioned the graduate component of it all. So I'm curious because you did pursue the graduate credits, and here's an example as far as the syllabus that goes along with that. It's through Western State Colorado University, and it's 3 accredited credits of graduate level. If you have somebody that's out there that is kind of thinking about doing this, would you recommend that they accompany it with the grad credits, or that they leave that part off?
So I think that comes down to how you, from a learning perspective, I would say I would urge people to go through Western Colorado, because I found that the syllabus, the texts, the push to really have reflection through writing and through talking while you're there provided space for me to do a deeper level of learning than I might have otherwise. But if you felt like there was that little rub that I spoke of, where people would be less apt to fund graduate units, then you can also look at it as an immersion experience, building language and language abilities and cultural competence.
And as you can see here, as a quick plug, they've got these course requirements as far as the deliverables of this course. And so it's really not too much. Justin did mention that there's a travel journal that goes along with it, in addition to a lesson plan that you could potentially implement when you get back. And so I agree with you, though, as far as a deeper level of reflection. And there are a couple of opportunities throughout the trip that we get together with our cohort of graduate level people to be able to do additional and deeper reflection. So I'm glad that you did mention that. Thank you.
There's a little bit of sacrifice when you're there. How you doing, Nate? So Nate's with us. So one example is, you know, there is a push to do some of that reflection. So I can remember at least one night where I was in writing while Nate went out and experienced more culture in the evening. So.
Yeah, we've got Nate here. Thanks for joining us, Nate. I did give everybody a little bit of a background as far as your lens, a little bit of your history as far as your journey. So Nate is going to kind of talk a little bit about how he was able to participate. He's been on the trip twice. So Nate, you want to just kind of give us a little synopsis? And we don't have your microphone on, man. I think you gotta hit the button that has microphone. It should be in the lower left corner. Well, it sounds like we're having a few technical difficulties with Nate here. But keep working on that, Nate. I'm going to move on to one thing as far as hopefully we can get you up and running. There's a button in the lower left, I think, that has a little picture of a microphone that's kind of crossed through. So try to get that going. So in your district, the Educational Association, the union, typically will have some funds available. Not typically, but sometimes. So that's another opportunity, is to be able to look at, especially if you're a union member. Typically, it's only available to union members. So that's a possibility. And then your district, a lot of times public districts will have an educational foundation. So that will go to some innovative funds related to curriculum, some items that typically might not be funded by a general education budget. So that's also something that you might want to consider as you're trying to get some funding for your trip, or either educational foundation or the teachers union within your district. Okay, so now I see, Nate, that you are, let me just, now it looks like it's muted. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't before, but maybe you just need to turn up your volume, Nate, because now it looks like it is muted for you. So try to hit the volume or the speaker button one more time, because it looks like you did mute that, and then you can try to maybe turn up the volume a little bit on your computer. Uh-oh. Okay, well, hopefully he'll join us again. I think he's trying to hang up and try again. So while he's doing that, we're going to move on to a few other ideas that are from external organizations. So this is something that I've kind of compiled here and there as far as some additional ideas. If all the other elements fail, there's a really great organization called the Fund for Teachers. And I'm not exactly sure as the histories of this, but they've got a lot of great avenues as far as possible funding sources. And so I don't know exactly the history of it, but I do know that they do fund travel experiences, and they have a pretty big cache of funding available. So that might be something that you can check out. In addition to your district educational association, your teachers union, sometimes, like in the case of this one with New Jersey, we do have a state level foundation that is specifically for this sort of an opportunity. So I know in Colorado, for example, we've got like the district level educational associations, and then the one that's called CEA, Colorado Education Association. So that is a possibility as well. This one is just for New Jersey, but depending on what state you're from, that is also a possibility. And then, unfortunately, it sounds like it's not going to work out with Nate, so I'm going to go ahead and just...
You guys hear me?
Oh, there we
You
go.
are.
All right, Nate.
Yeah, sorry, man. I'm ignorant about technology, so
No worries, man.
worse than my Spanish. I don't know if the video is working either, but
Video's not, but that's all right. As long as we can hear your voice, man. It's good to hear your voice.
awesome. Good to see you. Yeah, hi,
Hey, Nate.
Justin. How are you?
Great.
Good. I don't know about the educational foundation for our district, but I represent I'm on the school board in the Poudre School District based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I drive a school bus for the Thompson School District, 14 miles south in Loveland, Colorado, where Steve grew up. And in 2014, the diversity coordinator for the Poudre School District based in Fort Collins got together a program and asked the superintendent to whether we could use some money from a mill levy to send 20 people to Guatemala through Steve's program. And the superintendent allowed us to use $35,000. So the school district paid $1,000 per student or per participant, and the participants paid $500, and that was the funding source. A similar thing happened last year in 2019, where Justin, Steve, and I participated in the Loveland School District called Thompson School District. And Steve tells me that that's may be happening again. And I was trying to encourage the elementary school where I drive a school bus into to do it this summer. And I think that elementary school principal has some funds available, professional development or other funds that she could use. So there might be school level fees as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And I totally agree that Justin touched on this a little bit, but this is the time of year that budgets are starting to be discussed. And so whether it is elements of a budget for the current fiscal year that maybe for whatever reason haven't been spent and they may or may not go away, or discussions related to the budget for the next school year. This is when those types of budget conversations are happening. So I know that oh, there we go, Nate. One school district that I've spoken with, they are opening up they're transitioning a couple schools into a dual language immersion school. And so they're interested in possibly taking some of their upcoming fiscal year budget, because this is going to be a pretty long transition. They're going to do it grade by grade. And so they're looking at possibly taking some money out of their general budget for the following year to be able to do that, but it wouldn't be until the next July, not July 2020, but July 2021. So, well, thank you guys. And I think the last questions that I have for you are, how do you feel that as an educator that the trip, that even if you did have to fork over some of your own funds, like how do you feel that you are either more culturally competent or more linguistically competent as a result of your experience. Nate, you want to start on that one?
I think, well, two things. Since I've gone twice, I felt like both times I was more sensitive to the barriers that students where their family is normally second language English faced. So I had that increased sensitivity, and on my school bus I've tried to teach my students whose parents don't speak English Spanish. Well, I don't know how much they're getting at home, but I try to do it on the bus. And I think it just gives me an increased sensitivity to the barriers that these families face. And in addition, I had tried 5 years ago in the Poudre School District based in Fort Collins to put together a program to teach bus drivers elementary Spanish so that they could more effectively communicate with the parents of their students. And that wasn't successful, but I'm going to keep trying to get that program in place. So that's something that's a long-term project. And this summer, when I was volunteering at the school outside of Antigua, Guatemala, I told those third graders that I'm going to be back when they're fifth graders. So I'm planning on coming back in July of 2021 because I love La Union Spanish School and I love Antigua, and I'm coming back.
Thanks, Nate. And I think a couple points before we pass it along to Justin to wrap it up of what I heard is, first of all, no matter what amount of Spanish that you are learning, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Nate, one of the most valuable aspects of that language immersion is the ability to empathize with your parent population and with your English language developing students, where because you are immersing yourself into a culture that does not speak your dominant language, that you're able to really get a level of empathy for students and for parents that are living in a society that doesn't speak their dominant language. So is that kind of along the lines with what you were talking about?
I think so. And when I've tried to communicate in some manner with Spanish first language parents, at least the fact that I'm able to have an elementary level of Spanish and the intention that I'm trying to communicate, I think they really appreciate that. So it builds a trust level that they appreciate.
Thanks, Nate. Justin?
Yeah, where to begin? In terms of language, it was a real boost for me. It put me in a place where I had basic conversational skills, and I really feel like I made some progress while I was there, and I'm slowly pushing that forward, but it put me in a position where I felt like realistically one day I might be able to be a bilingual speaker. Even though I'm a ways from that. So it gave me courage to do things like jump in conversations with parents where I'm explaining behaviors or complex conflicts with kids. And a lot of times I need help, or a lot of times it doesn't come across super clearly. But I feel like it's moved me to a different level of competency to be able to connect and navigate what school life is with parents and kids. From a learning perspective or a cultural competence perspective, I think a lot of it is that that empathy that you just talked about, and even more simply, it's helped me give, like with kids, it gives me pause when, let's say, one thing we were struggling with is there was a lot of hands-on activity, which is like triggering staff. Like, man, they're putting hands on kids, and so I was able to go back into my mind where and remember that their schooling is in a less structured environment, right? Like, so their breaks, kids are running around all over the place. People aren't getting hurt, but it's less structured than we have. So I was able to kind of, and I am able to kind of pause and say, there's going to be some transition for them to get to a school setting like we expect. And then finally, the learning piece has helped me to see parents as not just parents who are not yet able to access our system, but as like potential leaders in my school, as people who are resilient, who have gone through a whole bunch. Reading the history of people from Guatemala, like some oppressed people for a long time, right? And so now they're in a position where they can engage and they can build skills and they can become leaders in our community. And the school is a great place for them to practice some of those things. So I'm challenged to kind of come alongside of some of those dads and moms and work through the language piece and to kind of bring them into our school community in a way that that makes us all better.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned, in particular, we talk about empathy, right? And so up to this point, we've mainly talked about it from a lens of language. But one thing that I heard from you, Justin, is that especially being able to go into our partner school outside of Antigua, be a part of a school setting in Guatemala, and to be able to empathize with students once you return back as far as the cultural side, as far as not only the degree of structure that they may or especially may not be used to in a school setting, but just cultural norms, whether that be like related to time, where, you know, being able to empathize with students that may be habitually late, knowing that that is a major part of the culture depending on where they come from, and other elements of the culture where, whether it be going into that Spanish school, or I'm sorry, the Guatemalan elementary school, or just being part of a Latin American country and being a part of that culture for 2 weeks, it sounds like you're really able to empathize in that way as well.
Yeah. Got it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Justin and Nate. It's been great to be able to talk about funding, talk about the trip. We do have a couple of registration deadlines coming up for those people that may be interested in joining us this summer. The plan is to be able to continue into the unforeseeable future with this trip. Typically, it's around the 2 weeks immediately following July 4th. We've found that that's the dates that work the best for a number of educators throughout the United States and beyond. So if you are interested, please feel free to reach out. Spanish4Educators.org is the web address, and there's a contact us button on there that you can find my contact information. And then there's a registration page on there as well that gets into some of the details as far as registration and more information about the trip. So thanks again, guys. And really means a lot. And I hope that this was helpful for people as far as upcoming travel.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a life-changing experience both times. And that's why I'm going back, because I love it. And it's not necessarily about me. It's about trying to help our families that we're trying to work with to educate their students.
That's a wrap.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
All right.
Bet. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.